What's up everyone and welcome back to the MMA Zone. Today, let's get started with Robert Whittaker receives a warning for Khamzat Chimaev fight. Robert Whittaker and his wrestling defense has ruled the day many times in the past, but fellow middleweight contender Chael thinks that Bobby Knuckles could be headed for trouble on the mat in his upcoming fight with Khamzat Chimaev. If you followed Whittaker's career, you know he's defeated plenty of all-star wrestlers and grapplers, some of which include Yoel Romero twice, Jacare Souza, and Derek Brunson, among others. Not only that, Whittaker has won freestyle wrestling tournaments in Australia. On account of Whittaker's very well-rounded game, he's established himself as one of the greatest middleweights of his generation. But recently, Borralho spoke with Submission Radio, and during the interview, he was asked to weigh in on the October 26 scrap between Whittaker and Chimaev. Turns out, Borralho trained with Boers as he was preparing for the ill-fated 2022 fight with Nate Diaz. But that's why Borralho had this take on the upcoming fight. I think it's a very tough fight for Whittaker because Khamzat is a very great wrestler. And there's one thing about Khamzat that people don't realize too much, like they don't know what kind of level to expect from him. They know by seeing, but when you feel it, I think it's a little bit different. This kind of level of wrestling, of grappling. The best wrestler in the division, I think, is Khamzat, and we saw how he dominated Kamaru Usman. That is a great wrestler that fought like Damian Maia and didn't get dominated the way he was by Khamzat. Chael also noted that Whittaker may be able to tire Khamzat out, but it seems pretty clear he's expecting Chimaev to win. So I think this fight goes to Khamzat. I think Khamzat is going to dominate him in the wrestling, in the ground, but Whittaker was a champion though, so cannot doubt our champion. So definitely is a fun fight. I'm willing to see this fight for sure. It's going to be fascinating to see how the fight plays out. As it stands right now, Boers is the favorite to win, with odds in the range of -175. But what do you think? Will Whittaker prove his doubters wrong yet again and hand Chimaev his first defeat? Next, let's take a look at Belal Muhammad fires back at the MMA community. Recently, Shavkat Rakhmonov claimed that Belal Muhammad hasn't lived up to his promise to be an active champ because apparently he passed on fighting the contender on October 5th. Well, it wasn't long before the new welterweight king fired back at Rakhmonov as well as fans supporting that argument. Muhammad secured the welterweight title at UFC 304 by out-wrestling and grappling Leon Edwards for a unanimous decision victory. So when Rakhmonov reported that the UFC was hoping to have him fight Belal at UFC 307, it surprised more than a few folks. After all, UFC 304 just took place over a month ago. So following Rakhmonov's comments, the champion posted this: "Inactive, LOL, I'm still on trial and Shavkat hasn't fought since 2023. I think Shavkat and Usman should fight to find the real #1 contender." Shavkat Rakhmonov fires back at Belal Muhammad on Twitter, writing, "Do you have a case of selective memory, or did you just forget that you didn't fight for 14 months before challenging for the belt?" Belal responded saying, "Selective memory? Who's tweeting for you, bro? There's no translation for that in Kazakh." The news also prompted some people to question whether the UFC is hoping to make Belal's reign a short one. After all, Muhammad, who is not a prolific finisher, had to put together a 10-fight undefeated streak before he was tapped for a title shot. That line of thinking could be why Belal shared this. There's no question there's plenty of buzz around Shavkat these days, and for good reason, but it certainly looks like a lot of fans are siding with Belal on this one. Check out some of the reactions his post received. "I've been a hater, but this is actually a pretty sweet comment, cause now you get to call the shots after these dudes didn't want to give you the shot. For the record, as much as a hater as I was, I thought you deserved that title shot pretty clearly after the Brady win. I want Shavkat to have the next shot just as much as anybody else does, but Belal is definitely not wrong here. I hate to admit it." Not everyone is on board with Belal, however, as here's one example of a dissenting view. "You're doing what Leon did, and the very thing you complained about that screwed you over by pushing Leon. He's on a 3-fight skid and seemingly declining. Isn't this exactly what irked you about Leon?" And here's another person who doesn't believe that Usman should be booked for a title shot eliminator. "If there's going to be a #1 contender fight, it should be Shavkat versus JDM. But where do you come in on this? Should Muhammad have agreed to fight Rakhmonov at UFC 307? And is the UFC trying to chuck Belal out of the championship spotlight?" Up next, Dana White is working on huge announcement. Depending on who you talk to, the UFC's 2024 campaign hasn't exactly been what a lot of people hoped. But recent comments from Dana White probably has a lot of fans on high alert. Of course, 2024 has had its fair share of memorable "where were you when" moments, the kind that even had mainstream and casual fans buzzing. For example, Alex Pereira has continued to make history with not one, but 2 jaw-dropping knockouts. Max Holloway electrified everyone at UFC 300 by bombing out Justin Gaethje with 1 second left to win the BMF belt. But compared to some of the UFC's other epic years, so far 2024 probably has not delivered. Could all that change before the year's up? Or in 2025? During a recent live session on social media, Dana White announced that news regarding the likes of Conor McGregor, Charles Oliveira, Michael Chandler, and Max Holloway would be arriving very soon. Further, McGregor, Chandler, and Poirier have all followed up via social media as well and echoed what White said. So yeah, could we finally soon hear when McGregor and Chandler are going to fight? And what could be in store for Poirier and Oliveira? There's been some talk online that the UFC could be looking at having Do Bronx fight Alexander Volkanovski, and speculation about Poirier and Nate Diaz finally throwing hands has also popped up again. But what do you think? Hopefully we find out what White was referring to sooner rather than later. Chael Sonnen sends a message to Tom Aspinall. On account of the path of destruction Tom Aspinall has left in the UFC's heavyweight division, there are a lot of folks who believe that he could be the one to hand Jon Jones his first legitimate defeat. But according to Chael Sonnen, Aspinall's dominant run to date could in fact be a bad thing against Bones. How's that now? Well, we'll tell you. Since Aspinall arrived in the UFC, he's delivered on the hype super big time, as he's gone 8-1 to date. His only loss came via a freak knee injury in his first fight with Curtis Blades, and Aspinall's finished 7 of his opponents inside of round 1. Only Andrei Arlovski made it out of the first round with the English star, and he was subbed by Aspinall in round 2. So due to the ridiculous athleticism Aspinall has showcased to date, and because of his awe-inspiring finishing tools, many believe he could defeat Jon Jones. But in a video on his YouTube channel, Sonnen outlined why Aspinall's impressive run to date may in fact come back to haunt him. I'm not sure you understand that. That is not helpful. That's not a good thing. It looks good and it sounds good. It's not good. When you find yourself in a fight harder than you're used to, it's a problem for everybody. It is the #1 reason that Ronda lost to Holly Holm. It was not the right leg kick. It was because the 6 other girls that Ronda had been in there with checked out collectively in a shorter time than Holly had made it. That was the problem. It's a problem for everyone. There's nothing you can do about it. It's an interesting take from Sonnen. Aspinall's probably been more stressed opening problematic jars of pickles than in some of his UFC fights to date. But what do you think? Is Aspinall in for a rude awakening if and when he fights Bones? UFC updates. UFC matchmakers continue to work away at building the promotion schedule and filling in gaps as needed. Case in point, recently, featherweight prospect Tommy Gunn McMillan reportedly announced he will not fight Austin Bashi on Dana White's Contender Series as expected. The 6-0 fighter posted a following statement about his withdrawal. I've been trying to fight in front of Dana White since I started training MMA in 3rd grade. To have my opportunity at a UFC contract be postponed is a humbling experience that reminds me every day my family, friends, and I are healthy is a blessing. I will use this minor setback as an opportunity to grow like I've done with all the other adversity life has thrown at me along this journey. Mafia will see me in the UFC before 2024 is over. I had a favorable matchup against a short grappler that I would smoke. The universe just saved Austin Bashi's career. I'll be in the Batcave cooking up the comeback. ESPN Deportes is reporting that stepping in for McMillan will be Dorian Ramos. Ramos has gone 8-2 to date in professional MMA action. Bashi, meanwhile, holds an impressive 12-0 record to date. Matias Andres from Fight Life is reporting that UFC's December 14th card in Tampa will feature a strawweight scrap between Piera Rodriguez and Josephine Lindgren Knudsen. Sweden's Knudsen will be looking for her 3rd UFC win, and if she gets it, the decorated kickboxer will move to 9-0 in MMA. Venezuela's Rodriguez, meanwhile, could be looking at a must-win situation. She's dropped her last 2 UFC fights and now holds a record of 9-2. Belal Muhammad receives praise for UFC fight. Sure, not everyone was screaming from the rooftops telling the world to watch Belal Muhammad's win at UFC 304. But one of the people who was impressed by what Muhammad did was former opponent Stephen Thompson. Muhammad faced Leon Edwards at the Manchester card on June 27th and proceeded to out-wrestle and out-grapple the English fighter en route to a clear-cut decision victory. More recently, Thompson appeared on Michael Bisping's Believe You Me podcast, and while doing so, Wonderboy heaped praise on Belal's UFC 304 performance. Here's some of what he had to say. It was unbelievable, for one, to be able to beat someone like Leon Edwards, who went almost 10 rounds with Kamaru Usman, who beat Colby Covington. In my eyes, it didn't look like the Leon of old. I know he was in shape for the fight. I know it was late. But at the same time, I've never seen a cardio or a gas tank on anybody like I did Belal Muhammad that night. Leon Edwards, he tired like a normal athlete, but freaking Belal Muhammad was just as fresh in the 5th as he was in the 1st. It was wild, and you could see the fatigue in Leon, but hats off to him, man. Even if you're a just stand and bang type of fan who doesn't like watching wrestling and grappling centric fighters, you have to admit Thompson is spot on here. Not only was the 36-year-old in ridiculously good shape, as Thompson noted, Belal took Edwards down numerous times and controlled him on the ground. That's not something anyone has been able to do in recent years. And that includes the likes of Colby Covington and Kamaru Usman. Not long ago, Edwards' coach reported the former champ was dealing with back issues heading into UFC 304. So, would a third fight between these two play out differently? Islam Makhachev is still injured as a new video emerges showing his hand wrapped while wrestling a kid. It was reported that he had a hand/wrist injury before, and it looks like it hasn't fully healed yet. Top comments. Everyone roasting my guy Belal for not accepting the fight clearly have never competed in their life. He needs to recover. You guys expect him to start training camp again right away? Y'all are so delusional. I understand he was talking about staying active, but let's be for real here. This is a tactic that the UFC uses to get rid of the champions they don't want. It's clear as day. So you want to give Belal 6 months off and have his contender Shavkat fight, but then Shavkat must turn around and fight in under 6 months against Belal? Honestly, I think Volk should start picking a few fights to end on and then retire into a UFC cooking show with the Diamond. They could do meal preps, go to fight week meals, maybe on special episodes like a Tough or something they cook a victory dinner for the winner and team. I could see it working. Both have great camera presence and are highly skilled in the kitchen. Not saying he still doesn't have it, but what is left to do inside the cage for him? I just want to see him live a healthy life after fighting. I love Volk, but he should rest this year.